Yeah, this game. Yeah, it's interesting. You know what you were saying about your son and how he took to it a little bit more. But the game seems to be for someone like him, but it's also not like his bread and butter when he can play something like Skylanders or a Lego game.
Well, and the issue for me is like as his dad, like I like playing games with him, and Knack has a terrible co-op experience. But Lego Marvel, we can sit down and play together, and each of us is getting something out of it, right? Like I don't feel like either experience is compromised. He's not frustrated because he can't do the things that I find enjoyable. And I'm not bored because I'm not stuck doing very, very simple, repetitive gameplay stuff.
Right.
It's just outside of my interest level at this point.
Remember, viewers, tweet your questions at IGN, #PS4, just like Andy Salazar did. Steve, what age group do you think would enjoy Knack, and how many of those people are getting a PS4 at launch?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Well, like I said, my son is 8, and he enjoyed the game. I've seen at GameStops and Best Buys when they've had kiosks with this setup. Most of the people who are sitting there playing it seem to be, 6 to 12 years old. So this is a little bit spoiler here. Let me skip past this cutscene. So this is a bigger Knack. And this is one of the problems I have with this, is that the decision for how big or how small you're going to be in a level is based less on how well you're doing and more on what the designer wants you to have. So you start off this level, you're already big, and you're not really going to get much bigger or much smaller than this throughout the course of the level. So this premise that you're going to grow and shrink based on your actions and have this interesting risk versus reward for gathering relics and using them in combat, you just end up being really constrained by what the developer wants you to experience at the time. So either you have to trade in all your relics at the end of a level to open a gate, or you start a level right next to a gigantic box of crates, so even if you die, you're still a big Knack when you come in and replay the level.
Right, so there's no strategy really in it. There's no...
Very little,
Yeah.
very little. I mean, there are a few interesting super moves, and some of the enemies actually have interesting, here's a great example of a cutscene that, well, why don't I just play that? Like, why do you have to show me jumping off a bridge when I was just standing right there? So there are some interesting enemies that require different tactics. Like this guy lobs shells at you, and then he spits out this purple goo, and there are other tanks that have energy fields and things like that, and enemies with ranged attacks and area of effect powers and things like that. So you get a little more excitement just in determining how you're going to face each individual enemy. But Knack himself is pretty much the same start to finish. The things that you're doing at the very beginning of the game are largely the things you're doing at the end. And that's a little difficult for me to swallow. But I do like, as I said, the sense of scale. Like he's really big here, and it's a very different kind of feel than you get when you're that little tiny Knack wandering around through the forest. But he looks kind of like a Muppet to me, right? Like I'm not really sure what to make of the tone of this game because he's super serious and his lines are always very serious and he's got this super deep voice, but he clearly looks like a comical character, and there's just no charm or humor in the dialogue or the story.
Yeah, the character design is very interesting to me actually. Like, when I was in Japan, they showed off at the Studio Japan, that the Sony-owned studio that made the game, was showing off some of the other designs, like older designs for Knack, and it seemed like there was no right or wrong answer for them because it wasn't. Right. It's not like it's not like Ratchet and Clank where they're working off each other or something like that. It's not. The character's interesting. I'm wondering like how people are going to relate to him as opposed to the characters around him. And if they've been pretty clear that they would like to make this a series if it does well. And so like, who will Knack always be the character with these human characters with him, or like I'm wondering where it can go. Like what it doesn't have that same like. It doesn't seem to aesthetically have that same je ne sais quoi that like Ratchet and Clank has or something like that.
Classed it up with that.
Yeah,
That was nice.
I don't know French.
Yeah, I mean, same with Spyro, right? Like, look what happened with Spyro. Spyro's now at the center of this gigantic Skylanders experience. And I don't know that Knack really lends himself to that. I mean, is he going to be in the new version of PS All-Stars, maybe?
Yeah.
Like, it could totally be.
I was going to say, if All-Stars survived, would have been cool to have him in there. It's just weird, too, that the main characters in both Knack and Killzone are named Lucas.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. So you see there, that was a neat superpower that I triggered where I was able to sort of send out some of my relics to defeat the enemies and then they come back to you. And that's a really cool effect, but that's sort of all it is. So here we are throwing tanks around at bad guys.
What is Knack? Do we know? What is the creature?
So that's a little confusing as well. So there's another character called the Doctor, and you saw him in the previous cutscene as I walked out onto this clearing. And the Doctor found Knack and then sort of also kind of created Knack at the same time. So he's made up out of these relics, which are these generic blocks that he's made out of. And the relics are the remnants of some long-lost civilization. And the current civilization uses them now as a source of power. So they use them to fuel their cars and their planes and their generators and things like that. So that's sort of what Knack's made out of. And there's a little bit of that in the story, sort of the quest for relics and what they mean and who controls them. But again, it's a little jumbly. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. For example, you're spending a lot of time fighting the goblins, and it's never established that you should be trying to defend the humans from the goblins, because it turns out the humans have been pretty terrible to them. They've run them out of their cities, and the goblins are basically just trying to fight back. And it's not sort of like a complicated, sophisticated take on morality and sort of the circumstantial nature of it, like you'd get in a game like Spec Ops, where it's like, I don't know who the good guys are here. This just seems like lazy storytelling to me, honestly.
Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't really know what their motivation was, either side really. So it's cool. I'm actually looking forward to just seeing what this game's all about. Like, I played it in such pieces at events. We haven't really gotten the full picture. Oh yeah, this is a really impressive.
Yeah, that's cool.
So here's a nice
graphical
power.
effect. PS3 couldn't do that.
Yeah, PS4 absolutely cannot do that. So that's sort of a tornado effect where Knack takes the relics that he's made up out of and spins them around his body. And the levels are nice, and you can get some destruction here. That's kind of cool. It's it's not like Battlefield or anything, but it's still kind of nice to have that as an effect.
This feels very empty.
Yeah,
like there's nothing going on.
Yeah, and that's the emotional and narrative content of the game as well, Damon. It's not just sort of the gameplay. It's just there's not a lot to it in terms of what.
Here you go. One police car is over here now.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
shaking his fist at you.
Darn you, Knack. So I don't know. I mean, I think there are things about this game to enjoy, and I think it definitely has elements that show a lot of potential. But just overall, the entire experience just left me cold. It wasn't, I'm sitting there loading this game up and thinking, oh, there's also Killzone and Resogun on this thing, and here I am playing Knack. It took me, I guess, about 11 hours to finish the game, and I'm like Colin. Like, I try to seek out every little thing. There are plenty of collectibles to get in the game. But one of the annoying things is the collectibles are only available if you're playing through the full game. So when you finish the game, you unlock the individual chapters and can go back and play them again. But the individual chapters don't have the collectibles.
Really? So you can't go back and like hunt for the ones you missed? Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
That's bizarre.
You can do it, but you can only do it in the context of replaying the entire game from start to finish.
Wow, that's going to annoy PS3trophies.org over there. I'll tell you what. They're not going to be feeling that too much.
Yeah, and this game does have a number of easy to get trophies fairly early on. I loaded up this game on your debug, Colin, which we're playing it on right now, and immediately I got like 4 or 5 trophies right away. We haven't seen any in this current playthrough we're doing, but they're pretty easy to get.
Right on, yeah. One of the cool things that they showed, and I'm not sure how much we really got to mess with this too much, was some of the collectibles you find, you can actually interact with people on PlayStation Network, right, and like swap out collectibles that you find with things your friends found, right?
Yeah, that's right. So if you we haven't had a chance to do that yet because the service is obviously not completely live and in the wild yet. But if you unlock certain things, you are able to trade them with your friends. So if you're not able to get certain collectibles, you don't necessarily have to go back and play through the whole game. It seems.
So that might be their way around it. Yeah. I don't know. That's still interesting.
Let me show. Do we have time for one more level here?
Of course.
I show one more.